Hello, everyone. I am
Hello.
Sharon Smoot, and I'm here with my business partner, Donell Henderson,
Hello, everyone.
for episode, what is this, 11?
I think this is 11.
11?
Yeah.
Episode 11 of Realtor Life with Donell and Sharon. And as usual, we are excited to be here with you tonight.
Absolutely.
To discuss
Yeah.
an interesting topic.
They always are, but tonight is definitely going to be something that relates to real world experiences and today's times.
Yes, yes. So if you've never joined us before, Donell and I have collectively been in this business for just under 20 years.
Mhm.
And, every time we think we've seen it all, we realize that, of course, we haven't.
We have not.
And we decided that we wanted to just share some of our experiences, things that we've learned over the years through trial and error, some through experiences, where something happens and we learn something new out of that situation. And we know that there are a lot of realtors and real estate agents out there who have questions that they might be afraid to ask, or that they don't feel they're getting good answers to. Let me mute myself on my phone.
Mhm.
And so we decided that we wanted to do something about that and just become a resource for people. And thus was born Realtor Life with Donell and Sharon. Hey, Tiffany, how are you? And so here we are, trying to be of assistance and just help out someone who may need help.
Absolutely. We're not experts. We're just real life people that are sharing with other real life people, real life experiences. And hopefully what we're sharing, Sharon, is valuable. It may not necessarily be anything new, but it may be a different twist on something you already know.
Right. So tonight's topic is tips for navigating an extreme seller's market. So you know what a seller's market is. It's when demand is high and supply is low. More buyers in the market looking to purchase than there are homes on the market for sale. And since the pandemic hit, the market has become so crazy, and what would have been a seller's market has become an extreme seller's market.
Absolutely.
Inventory is so low that the best houses are sometimes getting 20, 30, 40 offers on them.
Mm-hmm.
And houses are selling for more than list price, sometimes significantly more than list price.
Yeah.
And so we just wanted to share some things that we've learned along the way as we have attempted to navigate the current extreme sellers market.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was thinking that we could do is just kind of really start at the beginning of the purchase and sale agreement. And the very first thing that you have to fill in, besides the legal description and all that stuff, is the purchase price.
Yep.
So let's talk about how much to offer. Okay. And everybody, we are in Georgia, so most of what we're going to be saying tonight is based on what's going on in the Metro Atlanta area market. So take from it what you will, and what will work for you in whatever market you're in.
Absolutely.
So how do you decide how much to offer? Because the old way of doing things, pulling comps and all of that, isn't always relevant in an extreme seller's market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Donell, how do you approach advising your client on what to offer?
So I've kind of done a trial and error method to kind of figure out what works. And as you said, in a normal seller's market, one of the first things you do is pull a set of comps. Comps meaning houses that have sold within the last 6 months. And for me, comps that are within a half a mile of the subject property.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that to kind of get a gauge as to, okay, houses of similar size, bedrooms, baths, etc., typically have sold for X. So a fair price for the subject property would be Y. Okay. But as you said, in this day and age, that's out of the window. So for me personally, with, you can go to extremes on both sides. And one of the things that we as realtors do is educate our clients, for one.
Or try to.
Or try to. That is a true statement. We try to educate them. But, with sharing with technology at everyone's fingertips, people can hop on Zillow or Redfin or Realtor and do a lot of their comps themselves, or at least get an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mentioned 3 sites right there: Zillow, Redfin, and Realtor. Some of these sites will give you what they say is an estimate of value. Now, that may or may not be accurate. Okay, to me, I compare it to if you're looking at your credit, you could go to freecreditreport.com or Credit Karma or something like that and get a score.
Mm-hmm.
And in most people's minds, that's my credit score. But when they go and apply for a loan, the loan officer might say, well, your credit score is 625 and you need a 640. And the person says, well, I looked it up on Credit Karma and it was 672. To me, those sites, and relating that to a Zillow or something like that, is just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily going to be accurate. So the first thing that I try to do is explain to people that I'm the expert. I'm going to help navigate you through this process. Here is the sales price of the house. But we also have to go and look at the house to see what kind of condition the house is in, what areas the house is in, et cetera. And then from there, I would give what I believe is a fair price.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously going to be left up to the client to bid what he or she wants to. So by extremes, I'll give you an example. If a house is listed in a nice area, good school district, the house is in very good condition, is move-in ready. If it's listed at 350 and we know that this house is going to get a lot of offers, I would kind of get a gauge as to how bad do you really want to fight for this house?
Mm-hmm.
If the client says, well, I'm not really looking to pay more than list, okay, that tells me if I believe that a winning offer for this house would be 365 or 370, which is $15,000 to $20,000 over, it's going to be hard trying to convince that buyer, even though they may be pre-qualified or pre-approved for 400, to come up that high, because they feel they're still kind of using the old mentality of, I'm going to barter and negotiate and all that.
Right.
In this market, now in some cases, that's possible. If the house needs some work, if the seller is asking for some different out of the norm, things in the listing. For instance, if this person says we're going to need 30 to 45 days past the closing date, okay, that's going to deter a lot of buyers. But there are still some buyers that have that flexibility. So in that case, we may, depending on, if they've got any offers, I may say, maybe let's come close to list. But I definitely wouldn't go anything like, $10,000 less or anything like that. So honestly, for me, Sharon, it really depends on the house. I kind of come into it feeling that you've got to do list plus a minimum $5,000. minimum 5,000.
Okay.
Unless the house has obvious, needs. You got to replace the roof. You can literally see holes in the roof.
Mm-hmm.
You can see you got holes in the siding. You got carpet that needs to be replaced, or there is no carpet. And yes, I showed one last week where the person had a pet, apparently a pretty large dog, and I guess the dog had chewed certain areas of the carpet, so the homeowner just ripped all the carpet out. So you walked in, there was nothing but the subfloor there.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They still got it sold, and they'll probably get at least 10,000 over list. So and I mean, what I'm trying to say is, in this day and age, all the things that you've been taught to go through from a checklist standpoint, you still go through that checklist, but you've got to be a little bit more aggressive in today's market if it's a house that you really want. And you first have to kind of be on the same page with your client so that they go into it understanding that if we see something that you like, you probably are only going to get one opportunity to put an offer in.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make it our best offer.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking about offering more than list price. And, some of the crazy situations that I've had with my buyers where, we've offered $19,000 or $20,000 over list price. And the feedback that I get from the listing agent is, oh, we had 30 offers and several of them were for cash and several of them were significantly more than what your client offered.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you tell a client who may be considering offering more than list price
Mm-hmm.
about the appraisal and about, other risks of doing that?
Sure. So, I mean, you mentioned a couple of things there. Cash. Okay. So if I've got a cash buyer, the criteria is a little different than a typical buyer that's obtaining a loan. If you, in this day and age, as it has always been, cash is still king. Okay. You don't have to go through an underwriting process. Typically there's not an appraisal involved. So, but in my opinion, even in today's world, the percentage of people that are buying cash that are my clients, and that's another thing, there are cash buyers out there, but the typical agent is going to have, I would wager to say 90+% of their clients are going to be obtaining a loan.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, if you're obtaining a loan, the first thing that I've not seen from a conventional financing standpoint is that the lender usually is not going to lend more than the appraised value. Again, let's just use an example. If the house is listed at $350 and you offer full list price of $350, the house is expected to appraise for at least $350. If the house appraises for less than $350, the lender is not going to move forward with that loan. So something has to happen. Either the buyer and seller have to agree to lower the sales price to the appraised value, or the buyer has to be willing to come up with that difference. And in today's, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so I have certainly had not too long ago a situation where I reached out to the listing agent because I've done a request to show the property on showing time and he didn't respond. Mm-hmm. So I called him, and in speaking with him, I asked him, is there anything in particular that your sellers are looking for? And he said the only thing that they're looking for is how that appraisal gap is going to be covered. Mm-hmm. He said their expectation, if your client offers more than list price and the property doesn't appraise, that your client is prepared to bring that difference to closing. So how do you broach that with your clients? I mean, I tend to just rip the Band-Aid off. Mm-hmm. And, tell them in advance of even showing them the property. If I have that information, right. This is the situation on this house. If you like it and you want to make an offer over list price, you've got to be prepared to make up the difference if it doesn't appraise. And, you know, we need to provide proof of funds that you have the capability of doing that.
Mhm. It really kind of depends. If you've got an agent that will be forthcoming right up front and tell you, that's good to a certain extent because it doesn't waste time,
Mhm.
because you know exactly what you're dealing with. If your client is of the mindset, well, I don't want to pay more than list, or I definitely don't want to pay more than appraised value, and I don't have the money, or I have the money, but I just don't feel like I should. Why would I pay for something that doesn't appraise, which I can understand?
Mhm.
We go back to the initial question. How bad do you really want this house? Now, initially, my experience over the last 18 months or so has been, most people will start off saying that,
Right.
but based on their personal situation, meaning if they're renting and they're renting month to month, and that pinch of paying more than you would at your rental complex than you normally should,
Yeah, you
if that
paying
gets
three or
to
four
you
hundred dollars
eventually,
more.
exactly, then I've noticed that people tend to soften after we've seen 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 houses that we did not get.
Yeah, I
So
think
then,
that falls into the category of I can show you better than I can tell you.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
You can tell a person all day what the reality of this market really is, but invariably they've got to experience it themselves. And usually we'll get to a point in the process where the person says, look, Donell, what is it that we got to do to win this house? Because we've seen
Mhm.
12, 13, 14 houses, and it doesn't seem like we're getting any closer. Why do we keep getting outbid?
Mhm.
So then when you dissect it a little bit more, like you were saying earlier, you kind of have to get into what I would say the different types of loans. Okay. And there are a difference, whether it's right or wrong. You and I have had the conversation. Of course, cash is king. It's kind of hard to compete against with cash. And if you were a seller and someone was offering you cash, doesn't have to have an appraisal, doesn't have to go through an underwriting process, can close in 14 days or less, versus a loan, whether it's conventional, FHA, VA, or whatever, USDA, you want the shortest route to the closing table and the most
Mhm.
direct route. That's cash.
Mhm.
Aside from cash, is it a conventional loan? Is it an FHA loan? Is it a VA loan? And to go back to what you were saying about the difference, depending on how confident a person is with their particular offer and what the seller is looking for. Some sellers, and again, I don't particularly agree with this mentality, but some sellers will just tell you right up front in the listing, no FHA offers accepted, regardless of the credit score, regardless of the resources and the funds and all that. No FHA. We only want conventional.
Or
Okay, now,
cash.
or cash, right? Cash is always accepted. But and sometimes there are reasons behind that, legitimate reasons. One might be, typically the FHA appraisal is a little bit more strict
Mhm.
than a conventional appraisal, or the FHA guidelines, which say the house has to meet certain guidelines to even, be approved for FHA or
Right.
qualify.
And so when you talk about guidelines, you just mean that if there are any safety or habitability issues,
Correct.
FHA requires that those issues be repaired prior to closing.
Correct. That's one.
Mhm.
That's one thing. One reason a seller may say no FHA, if they know the house has repairs that won't meet those standards, no need of wasting time. And me as a seller, I choose not to. Either I don't have the resources to make those corrections, or I just don't want to in this market because I
Right.
don't have to.
Don't
That's
have
number
to.
one.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Number two, FHA has a seasoning requirement, 90-day seasoning requirement, which means the current owner must have owned the house at least 90 days before they can sell the house again for an FHA.
And
I don't,
let's stop on that for a minute. That 90 days has to have passed before the date of the offer. So the offer cannot be written before the 91st day.
Right.
So
Right.
it's not that 90 days has to have passed between the time the seller acquired title and the date of the closing. It's between the time the seller acquired title and the date of the purchase and sale agreement.
Right. And you tend to see that a lot with some of the big internet type buyers. Some of your Zillows or Open Door or some of those type buyers that
And other
purchase the house.
investors that are doing fix and flips.
Fix and flip investors. That's
Mhm.
another big area. So those to me are legitimate reasons why a person might only want cash or conventional. But they're, Sharon, sometimes, I'm not gonna say a lot, I'll say sometimes it has nothing to do with either one of those categories. The person just has a stigma or preconceived negative connotation for FHA loans.
Mhm.
And I tend to have a problem with, because an FHA buyer, that's just a different type of loan. It doesn't say anything about the buyer's ability to purchase or
Right.
their credit or anything. And I
Right.
think that's unfortunate. So that's a long answer to your short question. How do you advise a person when they're looking to make that offer? If they are a conventional buyer, we tend to feel sometimes as though we could be a little bit more aggressive. More aggressive meaning we may not have to offer as much over list. Okay, because that perception is that conventional is strong.
Mhm.
If it were an FHA buyer, FHA buyers tend to have a little bit of a tougher time, unfortunately. And depending on the seller, FHA or conventional, I still advise the client, make your best offer that fits your criteria.
Okay. Now, we talked about the guidelines as far as the condition of the house with FHA, but I think another reason that there is a stigma attached to FHA offers is because of the amendatory clause.
Absolutely.
And that amendatory clause essentially says that the buyer can terminate the contract at any time if the appraisal comes in low. Could be sitting at the closing table and say, you know what, on second thought, I don't want to do this. And they can get their earnest money back. There is no penalty. So I think that is another reason why there is a certain stigma attached to FHA loans.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you look at it from the seller's point of view, the seller, again, is looking for the shortest route to the closing table, close as quickly based on the information that they have that's been disclosed. What's the shortest and safest route to go? What's the best offer, so to speak? And sometimes the highest offer may not necessarily be the best offer.
Right.
So if a person can close in cash in 5 days with no contingencies, that is about as solid of an offer as you can get. But if a conventional buyer is making an offer that they can close in 21 days and potentially offer $10,000 more with non-refundable earnest money up front, no contingencies, that's a pretty strong offer, even though it's a loan versus cash. It just kind of depends on what the seller is looking for and how confident they are and their personal situation. Some sellers have to get out as quick as possible, even if it's the lowest offer. As long as they clear the loan, if they have a lien on the property, they may look at that. So, but each situation is different. You just try to service your client, give them the most information so that they can make the best decision. And again, in this market, you're typically only going to get one opportunity. The days of let's put in a low offer and the seller will counter us and then we'll counter back and forth and all that. In this day, you rarely see that, have that opportunity.
Yeah. And I have a client that I am working with, and she's kind of in a wait and see mode because early on she decided that she wasn't paying more than list price for any house, and it's like, okay, well, this is somebody who doesn't want a house right now.
Exactly.
And now she is waiting for this tidal wave of foreclosures that's supposed to hit the market. And, I am in the middle of a training class about REOs and foreclosures, and they're predicting that it's probably going to be another 18 months before, we see a bunch of foreclosures. But anyway, let's move on. What do you say about asking the seller for closing costs? I saw a discussion in one of my Facebook groups about this. And a couple of the agents were saying, and I don't know what markets they were in, I don't think it was here in Metro Atlanta, but they were saying that they don't understand why agents are convincing their clients that they shouldn't ask for closing costs. And they each gave examples of deals that they recently closed or are on the verge of closing, where the sellers agreed to pay a small amount of closing costs, like $3,200 or less. So, and I don't know what the price points were on those homes. So are you in the camp of ask for it and let the sellers say no? Or are you in the camp of you want your offer to be as strong as possible? And in this market, a strong offer has zero seller closing costs.
Great question, Sharon. I'm of the mindset, and this is just based on my personal experience, you're going to get one shot and one shot only, most of the time. Out of 10 offers for 10 different houses, my experience has been at least eight of them are going to get a minimum of 10 offers, as many as 30 to 40. And for me, my mentality is I'm in the latter camp of, again, shoot your best shot, make your best shot, your only shot be your best shot. And your offer, in my opinion, has to be different than the other 15 offers that seller is going to get. So because I try to put myself on the other side of the table.
Hey, Kimberly.
Hey, Kimberly. If I am representing the seller, and sellers, again, information is readily available. So sellers know, they either know someone that has sold a house, they've seen something on the news, or they've read something that this is a competitive market. If you have a house to sell, you really don't have to give anything up. So I don't want to risk knocking us out of the area of contention because we ask for closing costs. So I'm of the mindset, by default, no closing costs asked, unless, now there may be a situation where I may ask for closing costs if we were offering so much more. An example, if we were offering $20,000 more than list, and the seller had requested to remain in the property for an extra 30 days, okay? And we were not asking them to pay any kind of rent for that 30 days after closing. We're offering you $20,000 more than list. We are, not doing a finance contingency, and we're not doing an appraisal contingency. In that case, we're offering so much more. I may see asking for some closing costs, because it's really, the closing costs is coming out of the excess of the list.
Right.
But even then, Sharon, in this market, it's so competitive, I would be skittish even asking for it then, because I know there could be someone else that offered, $19,000 to $20,000 over list, and they didn't ask for anything. So the thing in this market, you just don't know what the other agents and their clients are offering. And if you thought it up and it's a good offer, I just don't believe we're in a market where you can just say, okay, if we do this, 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 and this, we're definitely going to guarantee that we get this offer. I have seen it. I've been on both sides, and you and I have had listings in the last year, and you get to see all these offers coming in well above list. And when you least expect it, I had a townhouse recently listed at 215. The first hour we got an offer that was 10,000 over list. The first hour.
Sight
The second
unseen.
hour,
Sight unseen.
sight unseen, cash. Within 3 hours, we had 5 offers, all of them over list. And the buyer was so excited that they wanted to accept one of those right off the bat. The seller, I'm sorry, thank you. The seller wanted to accept one of those. And our agreement was we were going to wait at least 24 hours. Preferably throughout the weekend, but at least 24 hours just to see what came in. In the 24 hours period, they had listed at 215. We had one for 230 in the first 24 hours. Some of those were cash offers. By the weekend, and we didn't think we would get more than 15,000 over list. And this is a townhouse. The last offer we got in was 237.
Wow.
So my point is, you can, in a normal world, that 230 would have been super strong. The cash offer would have been super strong. Eventually, they ended up going with a conventional, and it wasn't the 237. It was somewhere in between. I think it was like 232 or so. But it just depends on the level of comfort that the seller has and what they perceive as the best offer.
Okay. So what about earnest money? Back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I mean like in 2019.
Exactly, back in the day. Recently, back in the day.
Earnest money of 1% of the sales price was pretty typical.
Correct.
In this extreme seller's market, are you seeing 1% still, or is it more like 2, 3, 4%?
I advise my clients to, again, let's be as aggressive as you, the client, can stand. And I give them different examples because, again, you got to set expectations right up front. Before we even get in the car, we got to be on the same wavelength.
Right.
Let's not drive all over Atlanta, look at a house, the first 5 houses you don't like, the 6th house you love. Now we're ready to put in an offer, and you want to be at 5,000 under list, and you only want to put up $1,000 earnest money on a $300,000 house. That is a waste of everybody's time, gas, energy, and effort.
Right.
So just me personally, I say a minimum, if you can stand it, of 3% or $7,500. Now that will adjust up or down depending on the price of the house.
Right.
Okay. We're not gonna put $7,500 down on a $150,000 house. Now, I know what you're thinking, Sharon. Where in the world in Atlanta are you gonna find a house for $150,000 in today's market? That was just an example. That was just an example.
Yeah, that's $150,000 is an investor special.
Correct. And I do have an investor client, and the investor market, that's a whole nother Wild West for another episode. But for his mentality is, depending on the amount of work, he will put down $1,000, but that's typically for a tear down. Okay. But for an average client that's looking for a residence to live in, if it's a $200,000 house, let's put down 6%. Let's put down $6,000. If, and I ask them, I don't want to spend your money, you tell me, do you feel comfortable with that? Okay, knowing that we're going in with the safety mechanisms already built in, certain time, dates, and things of that nature. As long as we meet those, you should be able to get your earnest money back if we meet our deadlines. but let's not go into 1%, because really you don't want to give the seller a freebie to knock you out of the running.
Right. And you want them to take your offer as seriously as possible.
Absolutely.
And when the earnest money is minuscule, that is an indicator to them that you might not be that serious, that you really don't have a lot of skin in the game. And
Correct.
honestly, I don't think that anybody should be willing to lose $1,000, but I think that for the average seller in this market, they'll think, well, goodness, anybody can, put up $1,000. I mean, they couldn't possibly be serious, versus someone who has put up $6,000, $7,000.
Correct.
And stands to lose that.
Correct. I just think you're only going to get one shot. Okay. And if a person says, well, I had one today, nice house, but there was only one bathroom upstairs, and there were 3 bedrooms upstairs. So that means if each one of those bedrooms is occupied, those 3 people are going to be sharing a single bath upstairs. Or someone's going to be going downstairs every time to use the downstairs bathroom. There was no half. I
noticed you said he.
Yes. So I don't think the wife and the 2 daughters were even considering going downstairs. So he by default knew, I'm going to be the one going downstairs.
Right.
But in that scenario, nice house, nice area, nice school district, all that, but it was $330,000. So to them, they were looking at it from a standpoint of, do we really want to pay $300,000 plus to share a bathroom upstairs? In that case, and they're probably going to put an offer in on the house, but they're not going to be very aggressive. In essence, they're going to just put a basic offer in. If we get it, we get it. If we don't, we're not upset.
Right.
As opposed to if this had been the house of their dreams, we kind of evaluate that when we're talking about making the offer as to what makes sense and how aggressive do we want to be. Do we want to really go after it? Or do we want to stick our toe in the water?
Okay. And let's see, what's next on the purchase and sale agreement? Time of possession. We talked about that a little bit. Do you generally put at closing, to check off at closing, and let the sellers come back and ask you if they can stay, assuming that you haven't already had a conversation and know that they need to stay for additional time?
Again, it kind of depends. My default answer is yes, at closing. Okay. Now, I've had some clients that have lost offers and lost a lot of offers, and they've learned through the necessity or the requirement of previous offers. Let's use that as a tool in our tool belt. A bargaining chip. So they will offer 5 to 7 days extra time past closing to allow the buyer time to move or something like that. And sometimes it works. It definitely doesn't hurt. But I think, again, when writing the offer, what we try to do is look at what will make our offer stand out from the other offers. Even if it's something ridiculous, at least we've got them looking in our direction.
Okay.
And by ridiculous, I'll give you an example.
Don't. Let's wait till we get to the special stipulations to talk about.
Okay, I've got some ridiculous ones for you.
Okay.
But we'll wait. At a minimum, you're going to look at Donell's offer.
Okay.
And you may not accept it, but we'll wait.
All right. So, closing attorney, I really don't think that there's a whole lot to negotiate on the closing attorney.
But I agree with you, but I have a question for you. Because a lot of times, I'm not gonna say a lot, sometimes I will see seller prefers to close with attorney X or attorney Y, or must close with attorney Y. Can you clear up what does the law say about choosing the closing attorney?
The purchase and sale agreement says that the buyer selects the closing attorney.
Correct.
If there is no financing involved, then I believe it says that the seller selects the closing attorney.
I think you're right.
But let me just look at a purchase and sale agreement while we're talking, and I can tell you exactly.
And I only bring that up, Sharon, because so many times I see must close with this. The seller is saying that in the listing. And I'm thinking, you can't require the buyer to do that.
So I'll do a quick screen share.
Okay.
So that we can look at this paragraph. Okay, what's going on with my Zoom? Nope, cancel that. Okay, here we go. So it is page 3, and it's paragraph, I guess that's A6. Let's see if that's B6. Buyer shall have the right to select the closing attorney to close this transaction and hereby selects the closing attorney referenced herein. In all cases where an individual closing attorney is named in this agreement, but the closing attorney is employed by or an owner, shareholder, or member in a law firm, the law firm shall be deemed to be the closing attorney. If buyer's mortgage lender refuses to allow that closing attorney to close this transaction, buyer shall select a different closing attorney acceptable to the mortgage lender. The closing attorney shall represent the mortgage lender in any transaction in which the buyer obtains mortgage financing, including transactions where the method of payment referenced herein is all cash. In transactions where the buyer does not obtain mortgage financing, the closing attorney shall represent the buyer. So that's actually a change, I think, from a previous version of the contract. So the buyer gets to select the closing attorney. Period. But I will say that I have certainly had situations where we have insisted that a particular closing attorney be used. I had a deal that was under contract at the end of last year that ultimately didn't end up closing until this year. But the initial buyer wanted to use a particular closing attorney. So that closing attorney had already run title and everything. And then the deal fell through because, and I guess maybe part of this is the closing attorney and me, and I know what it's like for a deal not to close. And I always farmed out my title work. So that was an expense. And if the deal didn't close, I still had to pay the title examiner. So I always think about that. And so when I relisted the property or put it back on the market, I included a notation that said closing attorney shall be whoever it was, because title has already been run.
Okay. And that's why I would think the majority of the reasons are probably just that. You're trying to recoup that cost that is already, someone else chose this attorney, they already ran the title. No need to run it again. Let's just use what's in existence. But it seems like, but if the person really put up a fuss and said, I don't want to close there, I want to close here, it is their right and they're the buyer. In that case, and I know we're getting off topic, we're going to get back on, but I just wanted to clear that up because that is, sometimes, in my case, most of the time, the buyer doesn't know a closing attorney and they don't really care.
Right. So, we all have our preferred closing attorneys that we like to use. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the due diligence period.
Okay.
Do you have a due diligence period? Do you waive the due diligence period and instead you use the option that the property is being sold with the right to request repairs. How do you work that?
90% of the time, and this is recent, I changed this within the last 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
I typically, I have a conversation again with the client, the buyer, and explain to them my logic. Again, we want to be as competitive as possible. And I suggest a 0-day due diligence and a 5-day right to request repairs.
Okay.
And I explained to them why. What do you get with one versus the other? Most of the time, they're okay with that, as long as they understand you can still get your earnest money back, but it has to be specific to the repairs.
Right.
It can't just be, I had a dream last night that this was not the right thing to do and I want to cancel.
Right. Because in Georgia, the way it works is that the buyer can terminate the contract at any time during the due diligence period. They don't even have to specify a reason for terminating, and they can get their earnest money back.
Mhm.
So essentially, by waiving the due diligence period and going with the right to request repairs, you're removing a certain degree of uncertainty that a seller might have over whether or not the buyer is really committed to purchasing the property.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that's what we're just trying to show, that we are very serious. And the only reason really that we would even consider canceling would be if the inspection uncovers something that is, a safety hazard, quite costly or expensive, or something related to specifically the inspection and repairs.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, we're ready to proceed forward.
Now, I did a CE class not too long ago with Seth Wiseman, and he had a special stipulation that was in the same realm that we're discussing.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can find it right quick. Yeah, buyer agrees not to purchase other property. And it says, let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, that the buyer warrants that buyer is not currently a party to any other purchase and sale contract to buy real property within X number of miles of the property, and will not contract to purchase any other property within X miles from the property during the pendency of this agreement. If buyer breaches this warranty, seller may terminate this agreement due to buyer's breach upon notice to buyer. Buyer acknowledges the seller will be significantly damaged as a result of such breach, and buyer and seller agree that seller shall be entitled to keep buyer's earnest money as liquidated damages, even if not all of the conditions or contingencies in the agreement have been fulfilled, or if the due diligence period has not yet expired, it being agreed that the amount is a reasonable pre-estimate of seller's actual damages and is not a penalty. So this is a way, I guess, if you're going to use the due diligence period to provide, again, some level of assurance to the seller that, you're not just tying up their property while you're still looking and hoping to find something that you like better.
Right. And,
so,
and coming from Seth Wiseman, he has a very good reputation, and from most people would probably agree he knows the law.
Absolutely.
So for him to come up with that statement or endorse that statement is carrying a lot of weight.
Okay. All right. So I guess we've covered due diligence period. So that's a perfect segue, since that was a special step, to talk about some special steps that you might include to sweeten your offer and get around some of the other things that we've talked about.
Well, one of the probably that I've used, and it's I think in this day and age probably quite standard, is the special step to offer to pay more. It kind of addresses the appraisal gap.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done in the last 18 months, and I would say of the deals that I've closed, I probably use this to actually win offers on maybe 75% of them, is the statement to not necessarily pay all the difference, but to pay a certain amount over and above the appraised value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, that goes back to a conversation with the client. What is it? How much can they, or are they willing to pay over appraised value? Should the house
Right.
not appraise at the sales price? So I've had some people say 10,000. I haven't had anyone to say over 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the buyers that I've worked with have said 3 to 5,000
Okay.
over appraised value. And we just
And
basically write a statement to that effect.
okay. So essentially what that special stipulation would say that is that buyer agrees to pay X number of dollars over appraised value up to a
A
certain
max.
dollar amount.
Yeah, I just say a max of the sales price.
Okay. Okay.
So that seems to be the norm. Initially, it worked better, but now I think everybody is using some form of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have seen some cases where the listing agent will say, are you willing to pay the full difference? And again, it depends on the area, it depends on the seller. And if the seller feels strong enough that they don't want to just 5,000 or 10,000 over, they want the full amount, whatever it is. But most of my clients, because to me, that's a big risk. I
Absolutely.
had one today, literally today, that we offered 385 and the appraisal came back at 355.
Oh, wow.
It was a $30,000 difference. So, if you say you're going to pay the entire difference, that's $30,000 over and above the closing costs that you were already expecting to pay that the buyer is now responsible for. So
Right.
we tend to cap it at 5, 10, whatever the buyer is willing to accept.
Mm-hmm.
But I do make very clear that this is over and above cost of what you and your lender may have talked about as far as closing costs. So if you're saying $5,000, that's not 5,000 included in your original estimate of closing costs.
Right. Right.
It's the estimate plus an additional 5,000.
Right. So if your lender told you you need to be prepared to bring $12,000 to closing, that means you have to bring 17,000.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And sometimes people will say, well, wait a minute. I didn't know that. I don't have that much. Well, let's not write that in. Now that may lessen our competitive, edge.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's not just about being competitive. It's about, working within your budget.
Right.
And
Right.
that more than anything is ultimately what we have to adhere to.
Right.
But that's just one example of one thing. But one of the more ridiculous ones that I've written, and it actually, when we were sitting at the closing table, the listing agent said, we had never seen anything like it. We laughed at your offer, but ultimately we said, if they're that creative, this person must really be serious.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a $325,000 home. We put down 10,000 earnest money. We waived the financing contingency. And just as an extra cherry on top, we threw in a $350 Delta gift card.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, you can write whatever you want in the offer. Some of the things that you write may or may not fit the lender's specific guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had two that we wrote it in on during the offer. One of them, it went through fine, no problem. The other one, the underwriter said, you can't have this, as part of the offer.
Uh-huh.
So they advised us to take it out. And I believe that one was a VA loan,
Okay.
the one that was
So,
not accepted.
so did the buyer still give the gift card?
They did
Okay.
outside.
Outside. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was a conventional, and it didn't have any problem. It went through with no issues or concerns
Okay.
from the underwriter. But the thing is, I mean, I've seen or heard, I haven't done it, but I've heard of people that have, uh, had like an exotic car, and the person said, I'll let you, rent my car with appropriate insurance. You show me the appropriate insurance, but you can rent my Corvette for 2 days free use.
Mm-hmm.
You can use my chateau in France for a week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can do, I think, anything. And again, it's not so much as to whether, some of this stuff may not make it through the underwriting process. Understand that up front, because ultimately everything you put in there has to be reviewed and approved by the underwriter if they're getting a loan. But what we're trying to do is just draw attention from the other 30 offers. Hey, look at us over here. We're going to give you a very solid offer. We're putting down a very good earnest money deposit. We're going to close quick. We may or may not, depending on the buyer, waive, we've got a short inspection period. 3 to 5 days is typically what I would do. My standard is 5, but I've got several inspection companies on standby. If we have to do it in 3, we can do it in 3, but I tend to like 5 because you could be in a weekend period.
Yeah.
Or a holiday period. So again, I'm just trying to get the seller to just look at my offer, my client's offer. And it may or may not be the highest offer.
So one of the other things that I have tried with an FHA buyer, and it was a situation where the listing didn't specify that the seller was looking for cash or conventional.
Mm-hmm.
And before I wrote the offer, I contacted the listing agent, got voicemail. I wrote the offer, my client signed it, submitted it. And I swear it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes later that the listing agent returned my phone call and sprang on me that her clients were looking for cash or conventional only.
Oh,
and I explained to her that my client was a very strong FHA buyer, that she loved the house. And when we wrote the offer, one of the things that we did was indicate that she would be willing to pay for any lender required repairs up to a certain dollar amount. And that didn't mean anything to them. They rejected her offer, accepted another offer, went under contract. A week or so later, the property goes back on the market. And when I realized it was back on the market, I contacted my client, said, hey, do you want to try again? And she said, yes. Now, ordinarily, I say, don't do that, because all you're doing is negotiating against yourself. But she loves this house. So not only did she include that same provision that she was willing to pay X number of dollars for lender required repairs, we also indicated that she would allow the sellers to stay in the house for 30 days after closing. We did the $350 gift card deal. And there was something else that we did. I don't remember what, but anyway, long story short, they rejected that offer as well.
Okay.
So we opted to go the ribbon route.
Okay.
And, with ribbon, that is a way for FHA buyers in particular to kind of get around that fear that sellers have of FHA buyers. So with ribbon, there's a process. You have to submit the property to ribbon, and they have to evaluate it and determine the ribbon value.
Right.
And in this instance, their value was $10,000 higher than what we had offered to begin with, and $25,000 over list price.
Wow.
Yeah. And ultimately, the sellers accepted the ribbon offer. And so I don't know that ribbon is in all 50 states, but I think that everyone should take a look at ribbon. It's ribbonhome.com
Yeah.
and see if they're in your state and have that as an option, particularly for your FHA buyers. There is a small fee, 2.4% of the sales price if you end up using ribbon cash to make the purchase, 1% if the buyer uses their financing to purchase, and ribbon doesn't have to put up their own money to buy the property. Hey, Brenda. And they can close fairly quickly. They do require a 7-day inspection period. But I think that ribbon can be a promising alternative for lots of buyers, FHA buyers. If you're a seller who needs to, if you're selling another property and you're waiting for that home to go under contract, but you're eager to get into your new home, or maybe you're waiting for that home to close and you're eager to get into your new house, it is a good option.
No question about it, Sharon. And I've experienced it from both sides. I've had a seller as a client that accepted a ribbon offer. And I've had a buyer that has submitted, multiple ribbon offers. The big thing with Ribbon Home is explaining, and then sometimes when you submit it from the buyer side to a listing agent for a seller, it's just a matter of educating the agent so that he or she can then educate the seller as to what really is to be expected. And because a lot of agents have never heard of Ribbon Home, they don't understand the concept. And they say, well, if it's a cash offer, why do you need 30 days?
Right.
And it's just educating them that you're going to receive the amount of money that Ribbon has approved this house for, even if it doesn't appraise. And that's the number one question with Ribbon Home. Well, if the house doesn't appraise, don't worry about it. You're going to get your money as a seller. This is in their contract in writing, and it is guaranteed. So it's just educating everyone. It is a great tool. You and I have used it and use it successfully. And it can definitely increase it from an FHA standpoint, especially your chances of winning the offer. Now, it doesn't guarantee it, because there could be another ribbon offer with better terms.
Right.
Or it could be just a straight out cash offer with better terms that could close sooner. But again, we're just trying to present tools and tips to hopefully increase everyone's chances of winning. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do.
So Donell, before we finish up, let me just ask you one other question.
Okay.
What is your position on love letters?
Love letters were a thing of the past. I mean, great idea, great concept. And again, 18 months ago, I would have said, this is a great idea. And let's just explain what a love letter is, Sharon. A love letter that we're talking about is a letter that the buyer writes, and is basically meant to pull at the heartstrings of the seller. The buyer is going to just tell their story. I work at a hospital, or I'm a teacher, I'm married, and I have, 3 dogs and 1 cat, and we saw your house and we loved it. We can see ourselves spending Thanksgiving and Christmas at your house, and it would be the perfect place to start a family. Oh, isn't that sweet? Well, the thing is, 18 months ago, in a quote unquote normal market, that might work. The market is so competitive that everybody does a love letter, and the agents for sure, and the sellers probably have seen 10 to 15 love letters. So it's just not as, it doesn't have the impact that it once did. And two, I think that sometimes, I hadn't thought about this until now, but you really are putting a lot of your personal information out there, Sharon, that you really don't want to sacrifice just to get the house. And if you don't get it, then that information is out there. So I've
Well,
been advised most of the, not going to say most, but sometimes recently I've seen listing agents that put in the listing, please, no love
no
letters.
love letters. Well, and you know what? In that same continuing ed class that I did, Seth Wiseman pointed out that depending on what information is included in the love letter, that it could be a fair housing violation.
And that's, oh my
And
goodness.
once I heard that, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to encourage my clients to do that anymore.
You're trying to do something, you have good intentions, but you could actually end up getting into trouble.
Yeah.
That's never a good thing.
Yeah.
So the market is just so competitive. Everyone is trying, again, to be different, to look for that edge that separates them from all the other, offers that are being submitted. And in some cases, even with, we didn't get into a lot of detail, but even with I've had some discussion about the overappraised value clause that most people use in today's world. I've had, some attorneys say that could be an unfair advantage one way or the other. So be careful with that. So you definitely want to be creative, to be different, but at the same time, you don't want to get yourself or your client in trouble.
Right, right. Well, I think that we have covered some good information tonight. Does anybody who's on have any questions? Tiffany, if you have any questions, just put it in the comments. Brenda, if you have any, put them in the comments. And while I'm looking to see if any questions come through, I would just like to say that Donell and I are always looking for hungry, motivated, dedicated real estate professionals to join our team. We are an international company. EXP is international in over 17 countries, 59,000 plus agents strong. And we'd love to have you on our team. If you are considering making a change, if you're new to the business, we'd love to chat with you. We will put our information in the Zoom chat. And although I don't think anybody is on here, and I will add it to the Facebook description later on. But I think that Donell always has some good things to say about the company. So Donell, you want to put your little 2 cents in about why EXP is so amazing?
EXP is awesome. Sharon and I have enjoyed our time with EXP, and we've shared it with other agents that have come along with us. They offer so many opportunities to just expand your business, brand your business. And each person has his or her own reasons, but I'll just name a few. One is the revenue share versus profit share. The company allows the agents to share in the revenue of the company. Everyone starts at a very good commission split of 80%. So you're on an 80-20 split. That 20%, the company puts aside to give back to the agents for helping to grow the company. To me, that is awesome. And that's going to happen.
Revenue share, not profit share.
Revenue share. Exactly. Whether the company makes a profit or not, which it will, because we're growing by leaps and bounds every day, the agents share in that revenue. And it's not taking money from one agent to pay another agent. It's from the company's pool of the 20%. Another thing that is awesome is that you can actually be an owner in your own company through stock. The company is publicly traded and has been growing phenomenally over the last year or so. But again, with us being in 17 countries, as Sharon mentioned, and 59, almost 60,000 agents, that is evidence that the company is doing fantastic. And then last, definitely, but not least, and this is not all, but one of the big ones is the ability to have healthcare benefits. No other real estate company that I know of even offers healthcare. And as an independent contractor, sometimes we may not have that opportunity. This is an area for you to protect yourself and in what we do from a health perspective. So the fact that they even offer it to me is sets them apart from anyone else. The revenue share, you could have passive income in addition to what you're doing individually. You can grow
Yes.
your team nationally, if not internationally, if you choose. You just are presented with so many, just a plethora of opportunity. So Sharon and I are excited. We do this podcast every week just to share and just show people that we are excited, and we just like to share our information and life experiences. We love to have you join EXP as a part of and be a part of our team, our Atlanta team, Limitless. Please take a look, and if you have any questions, let us know. We'll be glad to speak with you.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So with that being said, we're going to let you go, but please tune in every Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We do this via Zoom and stream it live on Facebook. And we would love to have you. And so share with your friends and your family, anybody that you know who is a realtor or who is considering a career in real estate.
Absolutely.
Tiffany says, good job, great info. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks, Tiffany.
So yeah, that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, we will see you next Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Join us
Take
again for another
care.
great episode. Good night.
Bye-bye.